Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly into the world of medieval weddings, where nothing is as neat or Pinterest-worthy as you might imagine. You might think of flowers, white dresses, and romantic vows, but trust me, your medieval self is more likely standing in a smoky hall clutching a token of betrothal while uncles haggle like it's a farmer's market. The stakes? Land, honor, survival. And while you might dream of a candlelit "I do," the church authorities and your extended kin already decided long before you opened your mouth. You probably won't survive this without being turned into a bargaining chip. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Drop that in the comments.
Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You stand at the edge of a crowded hall, rough timber beams above, rushes crackling underfoot, and the heavy smell of roast meat hanging in the air. The betrothal, the first, most decisive step toward a wedding, is about to unfold. Forget dreamy proposals. This is pure contract theater. Your father and the bride's kin are huddled together, voices low, counting sums and measuring promises like merchants at a fair. A marriage here isn't a private spark of love. It's an agreement etched in property and obligation. You might be clutching a token, sometimes a ring, sometimes just a coin or a knife, that seals your pledge. Think of it as a medieval engagement ring, except far more practical. A knife isn't just sharp, it's symbolic, a promise that cuts into memory. Historians still argue whether these objects carried legal weight or were just visual theatrics. But one thing's clear, if you walk away now, it's scandal, lawsuits, maybe even excommunication.
The noise in the room dips as witnesses shuffle closer. A cleric may be present, but not always. Remember, the church's full grip on marriage takes centuries to solidify. What really matters here are the witnesses, neighbors, cousins, maybe that nosy aunt who remembers everyone's debts. They're the ones who will swear that promises were made, dowries agreed, and intentions binding. You'd better smile because you're locked in now. The quirky part? Some betrothals happened when children were barely out of the cradle. Parents might solemnly pledge a 5-year-old to another family's toddler, sealing alliances before either kid could spell their own name. Sure, it sounds absurd today, but back then it was an insurance policy against famine, feuds, and inheritance disputes. Medieval families were basically playing chess with living pawns. You, unfortunately, are one of them. As you look around the hall, you can sense the weight of reputation. These betrothals aren't whispered in secret. They're loudly proclaimed to ensure everyone knows what's at stake. The phrase, "marriage is public," rings true here. Without witnesses, your union may as well not exist. This is why the banns, those public announcements read in church, will later become so vital. For now, the crowd itself is your proof. A jug of ale makes its way through the crowd, sloshing as it's passed from hand to hand. Deals are thirsty work. You might hear a cousin grumble about the dowry. Too small, too risky, too insulting. In some places, families threw in extra gifts, livestock, bolts of cloth, even a precious goose or two. A goose, after all, means steady eggs and down for bedding. More romantic than it sounds, really. Once the promises are made, hands clasped, and tokens exchanged, the betrothal takes on the weight of destiny. To back out would be a social earthquake. Sometimes people did. Cue lawsuits in the bishop's court, where spurned brides or grooms accused each other of breaking promises. Imagine the medieval version of a messy breakup post, except instead of awkward Instagram unfollows, you're dragged before a cleric who might fine you or worse. And don't think you're free just because you're technically not married yet. Betrothal was nearly as binding as marriage. Couples might already be seen as socially tied, meaning if one partner died, the survivor could inherit property or claims. That's how seriously this stage was taken. You don't flirt your way out of this one. You survive it by nodding, smiling, and praying nobody suddenly demands more sheep. But even with all its heavy politics, there's something tender in the air. Families eye each other warily, but for the couple, whether eager, nervous, or entirely clueless, this is the first brush with a future neither fully controls. You might catch the bride sneaking a glance at you across the room, her veil slipping slightly. She doesn't smile, not yet, but in that flicker you realize, beneath the contracts and property clauses, two lives are about to be stitched together. The hall stirs again, voices rising as the deal is struck. Someone slams a hand down on the table, sealing the promise. A cheer goes up. The betrothal is done. You're not yet wed, but you might as well be. Your path is set, your life redirected. Outside, the world looks the same. Muddy lanes, barking dogs, the occasional cart creaking by. But for you, everything has shifted. You step outside for a breath of cold air, clutching your token tightly. It's small in your hand, yet impossibly heavy. A knife, a coin, maybe a ring. It doesn't matter. It's the weight of your future. And as the chill bites your cheeks, you can't help but laugh quietly. Modern engagements have sparkly diamonds, down-on-one-knee romance, and Instagram posts. You've got an uncle who demanded an extra goose, a lawyer in robes ready to sue if you break it off, and a crowd of witnesses itching to gossip if you sneeze at the wrong time. Welcome to your medieval wedding journey. You're only at the beginning. You wake the next morning still dazed from last night's betrothal. The echo of cheers and the creak of the hall's heavy doors seem to linger in your ears. You're not walking this road alone. Your family is pacing right alongside you, and their interests are welded to your every step. In the medieval world, marriage is never a private affair. It's a clan project, a woven knot of kinship and strategy. You may have been the one standing there with the token in your hand, but it's the web of family ties that determined who that token belonged to in the first place. As you shuffle across the packed earth floor of your home, you catch sight of relatives gathered, talking over cups of thin ale. They're already dissecting the terms: who brought what, who gained most, who looks shrewd. In their eyes, your wedding is less about your happiness and more about alliances, reputation, and security. This is how families built networks strong enough to survive famine, war, and the neighbor's endless boundary disputes. Marriage, for your kin, is a chessboard. Your cousin's marriage might bring access to better grazing lands, while your sister's union ties your family to a guild in the nearest town. Historians still argue whether families always thought strategically or whether some marriages really did blossom from affection, but most evidence suggests the scales tipped heavily toward advantage. That doesn't mean love was absent, it just wasn't the primary currency. Think less Romeo and Juliet and more boardroom and ledger. As you sit down, you hear your mother muttering about the bride's uncle. He's a sly negotiator, and she doesn't trust him. Your father rolls his eyes but knows she's right. In a world without dating apps or cozy coffee shop meetups, family networks are the filter through which every choice is made.
You marry not just a person, but an entire kin group, complete with cousins, feuds, and baggage. Imagine marrying someone today and discovering their whole extended family has veto power over your living room decor. That's the vibe. The quirky part? Sometimes families stretch their networks in odd ways. There are records of godparents who were supposed to be spiritual guides being drafted into matchmaking schemes. That created sticky problems because spiritual kinship was treated almost as binding as blood. Pairing up people connected through godparenthood could spark accusations of incest by canon law, which the church really frowned upon. But still, desperate families sometimes bent the rules, figuring survival trumped paperwork. Your own role feels strangely small. The menfolk argue over grazing rights. The women quietly assess what kind of wife the bride will be, whether she's hard-working, pious, fertile, and able to handle both childbirth and chickens. Everyone has an opinion. Even the children watch with wide eyes, already aware their turn will come. No one escapes the chain. Later that day, you visit the bride's household. Here, the kinship web shows its other side, hospitality. The families must get along, or at least pretend to. You're offered bread, perhaps dipped in honey if the hosts are feeling generous. The women bring out embroidered linens to show off their skill, hinting at what the bride can add to her new home. The men lift cups of ale and toasts, their words polite but layered with unspoken tension. We're allies now, so let's not stab each other over that meadow again. Historians still argue whether peasants experienced this process differently than nobles. For lords and ladies, kinship ties might stretch across counties or kingdoms, binding political alliances. For villagers, it might just mean ensuring someone will help plow your fields when your ox keels over. But whether on a grand stage or a humble lane, the principle remains. Family is everything. And let's be honest, family pressure can be suffocating. If your medieval aunt starts hinting that this marriage will finally fix the feud with the neighbors, you can't exactly roll your eyes and say, I just want to focus on me right now. Personal independence is as rare as a bath in February. Your role is to nod, agree, and accept the weight of everyone else's expectations. As evening falls, you notice how the women cluster together, whispering advice and warnings. Be patient with your husband, one says. Don't argue about bread, another adds. Their tone suggests survival strategies, not romantic tips. It's a sisterhood of survival, born from generations of watching kinship networks dictate futures. Meanwhile, the men are boasting about lineage, recounting who married whom, and which great-grandfather once fought alongside a famous knight. Kinship makes the medieval wedding feel like a spider's web. Every strand tugs another, and your movements ripple outward, touching cousins you've barely met. That web can protect you, offering aid in crises, or trap you in obligations you'd rather avoid. And as you drift toward sleep, you realize the wedding isn't just about tomorrow's feast or church vows. It's about carrying a whole family's hopes, fears, and bargains on your shoulders. Your modern self might grumble about meddling relatives today, but at least they don't measure your value in sheep, accuse your godparent of being incestuous, or expect your marriage to patch up a centuries-old feud. Medieval you? You're carrying the weight of an entire kinship empire, whether you like it or not. The days after the betrothal creep forward, and now the church's presence looms larger. If kinship has woven the net around you, the church pulls the threads tight. In medieval Europe,
the church steadily claimed authority over marriage, pressing the idea that a union was not merely a family bargain, but a sacrament. That shift meant rules, sometimes confusing, sometimes fiercely enforced, that determined who you could marry, how, and when. You shuffle into the parish church, its cool stone swallowing your footsteps. A faint smell of incense lingers in the air, clinging to the rough benches where villagers kneel. Here, the priest is less concerned with your mother's embroidery or your uncle's grazing rights. His focus is on one key word: consent. In theory, your spoken agreement, "I will," is enough to make the marriage valid. That tiny phrase carries the weight of eternity. But here's the twist. You must speak it freely, or at least you're supposed to. Historians still argue whether consent was ever truly free when families loomed like storm clouds in the background. The bans, the public announcements, add another layer. On 3 consecutive Sundays, the priest stands up at Mass and proclaims your names, declaring your intent to marry. It's not just ceremony, it's a medieval background check. Anyone with knowledge of why you shouldn't marry, say, a secret pre-contract, or that pesky godparent tie again, has the chance to shout it out. Picture your modern wedding derailed by a neighbor yelling, "Wait! She once promised to marry my cousin." Yes, awkward. The quirky tidbit. Sometimes people used the bans as a loophole. Couples eager to marry without family approval might rush to exchange vows privately, at a tavern door, in a field, even by a riverbank, because technically, verbal consent plus witnesses could seal the deal. The church hated this, branding it clandestine marriage, but it happened enough to keep bishops gnashing their teeth. One can imagine the exasperation. Not another couple sneaking vows by the cow pasture. Back in the church, the priest explains forbidden degrees of kinship. Cousins, off limits, unless you get a dispensation from higher up. That rule stretched so wide at times that almost everyone in a small village was technically related. Historians still argue whether these rules were meant to protect bloodlines or just increase the church's control by making dispensations profitable. Either way, you'd better hope your intended isn't too close on the family tree, or you'll need papal paperwork. You shift uncomfortably as the priest's voice echoes against the stone walls. The villagers around you listen, some nodding, others smirking. Everyone loves a good scandal, and the bans are like medieval reality TV. Will someone object? Will secrets spill? Most of the time, silence reigns, but the tension is always there. Your betrothal might have been a family affair, but the church ensures the whole village gets a peek into your business. Outside, children chase each other around the churchyard, their laughter clashing with the solemn announcements. The contrast is sharp. Inside, eternal vows. Outside, mud-smeared knees and wooden toys. That's medieval life in a nutshell, sacred and silly, side by side. Later, as you walk home, your mind chews on the idea of consent. What if you refused at the altar? In theory, that no would shatter everything. In practice, families could lean on you so hard that refusal felt impossible. There are tales of brides fainting or grooms trembling, not from nerves, but from sheer pressure. And yet, in court cases, judges sometimes upheld the bride's whispered protest, declaring the marriage invalid. Tiny cracks in the system where personal will peeked through. That night, as you sit by the fire, you imagine the scene again. The banns proclaimed, the hush in the church, the whispered gossip afterward. Your fate hinges on words, on public declarations, on whether anyone steps forward with an objection. It feels fragile, almost absurd, and yet
It's deadly serious. Think about it. Modern weddings have speak now or forever hold your peace. But it's theater. In the medieval world, someone really could stand up and end your match. One bitter cousin, one jilted admirer, one gossipy neighbor, and poof, your marriage plan unravels. So you lean closer to the fire, letting its warmth sink into your bones, and you mutter a half prayer, half plea. Let no one object. Let no old contract rise from the grave. Let my consent be enough. But deep down, you know the truth. In this world, your words matter, but so does everyone else's. The church listens, the village watches, and your family hovers, all waiting to see if this fragile path leads to vows or scandal. The morning sun slants through narrow windows, and you find yourself thinking about the stage where this whole spectacle will unfold. Venue, in the medieval sense, isn't about finding the prettiest meadow for your Instagram photos. It's about authority, legitimacy, and sheer practicality. Where the wedding takes place can make or break how people see your union. You picture the parish church first, its squat stone walls crouching against the wind. For many couples, this is the ideal place, holy ground, watched over by saints and parish records. To marry here signals respectability, weaving your vows into the heart of community life. The church may not be grand. Maybe it's little more than rough-hewn stone, a crooked bell, and walls damp with moss. But step inside, and you feel the weight of centuries, as though your whispered, "I will," joins a chorus of voices from generations before. Still, not everyone marries beneath those vaulted arches. Manor halls often host the nobility, where a lord's presence lends prestige. Imagine tapestries fluttering in a drafty great hall, dogs skittering underfoot, servants carrying trays of bread and salted meat. For nobles, marrying in a manor isn't just practical, it's political theater. Every guest is a witness, every carved beam a reminder of power. To marry in such a space declares that your family belongs in the game of alliances and land deals. And then there are the outdoor weddings, which might sound idyllic, but often meant mud, unpredictable rain, and the occasional goat wandering too close. Picture vows exchanged at the village green or right at the church door, because technically, that's where many ceremonies were supposed to happen. The church wanted marriages to be public, and what better stage than a threshold? It's like saying, yes, we're in God's sight, but also yours, neighbors, so don't pretend you didn't see this. Historians still argue whether couples preferred indoor church ceremonies earlier than we think, or whether the shift to consistently indoor weddings came later. The records can be maddeningly vague. Did in the church mean literally inside or just in front of it? Either way, the line between sacred and social spaces is blurry, and your vows might float on the wind rather than echo under stone. The quirky tidbit here? In some cases, weddings took place in fields or vineyards, chosen for convenience when travel was tough. Imagine being joined in matrimony while a donkey brays in the background and your cousin sneezes into the barley. Romantic? Perhaps not. Memorable? Absolutely. Back in your world, you picture the chaos of planning such an event. Today, people argue over banquet halls versus barns. In the medieval village, the argument might be church threshold or manor hearth. One choice offers divine legitimacy, the other flaunts social standing. Either way, you're not the one calling the shots. Your elders decide where your vows echo. On the morning of your own wedding, you step toward the chosen spot. If it's the churchyard, the ground is soft with dew, and neighbors crowd around, boots sinking slightly into the earth. Children jostle to see,
craning necks as though a miracle might happen. If it's a hall, the smell of roasted meat already fills the rafters, promising the feast to come. And if it's outdoors, you mutter a quick prayer for dry skies and no livestock interruptions. Your heart races, not just with nerves, but with the awareness that place matters. Where you stand tells the story of who you are, how much clout your family holds, and whether your union will be whispered about with admiration or smirks. Venue, in this world, is reputation carved into memory. You glance around, noticing how neighbors nod or raise eyebrows. Already, they're judging. Ah, at the church, respectable. Or, oh, in the manor, ambitious. Even the goats, chewing in the background, seem to have opinions. And as the murmurs ripple through the crowd, you realize that no matter how grand or humble the space, this place will be etched into your life story. Long after the feast is done and the songs fade, people will remember where you stood when you spoke the words. They'll tell their children, "I saw it with my own eyes, right there by the door." Or, "It was in the Lord's hall, under the old beam." The venue becomes not just a backdrop, but a landmark in memory. So you take a deep breath, straighten your shoulders, and step forward. The ground beneath you may be muddy, the hall drafty, or the stone floor freezing, but this is your stage, and history waits for your cue. The crowd gathers, buzzing with anticipation, and you notice how sound itself begins to sculpt the mood of the day. A wedding is not quiet business. It's meant to be heard, to echo through streets, fields, and halls, declaring to everyone, invited or not, that something momentous is happening. The procession begins. You step into line, the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel mingling with the strains of music drifting from a cluster of minstrels. Their instruments are simple but piercing, fiddles, flutes, and drums with hides stretched tight. The melodies carry far, sharp enough to catch the ears of villagers at work in distant fields. It's less about artistry and more about volume, like medieval surround sound designed to summon witnesses. You might expect solemn organ tones, but here the soundscape is earthy and lively. The drumbeat keeps everyone marching, the fiddle adds a lift, and voices, sometimes off-key, sometimes raucous, belt out songs about love, fertility, and the occasional bawdy joke slipped in for comic relief. Historians still argue whether professional musicians were common at ordinary weddings, or if most villagers just relied on neighbors with a knack for singing. Either way, noise is essential. Heralds, too, play their part. If your family has standing, a herald might stride ahead in brightly colored livery, shouting names, reciting lineage, or even announcing the dowry with theatrical flair. Picture your uncle bellowing, "Behold, 6 cows and 3 bolts of wool," half boasting, half warning off rivals. It's medieval marketing, complete with an audience of gossip-hungry neighbors. The quirky detail? Some regions used bells not just at the church, but throughout the procession, tied to horses or waved on sticks, their jangling believed to scare away demons lurking nearby. Nothing says romance like clanging metal to keep evil spirits from photobombing your big day. As you march, you can't help but compare it to modern parades. Instead of floats and confetti, there are flower garlands and the occasional mud splash. Instead of a brass band, you have bagpipes that wheeze dramatically. Instead of cameras, you have sharp-eyed villagers memorizing every stumble for later gossip. Children run alongside, some barefoot, shouting teases at the groom or daring glances at the bride. Old women mutter blessings, sometimes slipping tiny charms into the bride's path, sprigs of rosemary for memory,
or ribbons knotted thrice for luck. Every sound carries weight, songs for joy, chants for protection, jokes to ease tension. You feel the vibrations of the drum in your chest, steadying your steps. The bride advances too, veiled or crowned with flowers, her pace measured, her expression somewhere between solemn and overwhelmed. The music swells when she appears, a cue for everyone to hush and admire. In that moment, the soundscape isn't just noise, it's choreography, directing where eyes should turn and when hearts should quicken. And yet, beneath the pomp, you sense the fragility. A cracked drum skin, a fiddler too drunk to keep time, or a herald forgetting names could flip pride into embarrassment. That's part of the gamble. Public spectacle amplifies triumphs, but it also magnifies blunders. You silently pray no goat breaks loose into the procession. As the group winds toward the venue, the songs shift. Some ballads recall biblical marriages, others cheeky verses about ale and fertility. The line between sacred and secular blurs, as it always does. You're reminded of how medieval life rarely drew strict boundaries between reverence and laughter. It all flows together, just like this noisy parade. Finally, the music crescendos as you approach the threshold where vows will be spoken. Bells, fiddles, voices, even clapping hands create a wall of sound that presses on your ears. It's messy, imperfect, but undeniably alive. And as you step forward, you realize the procession isn't just moving you physically from one place to another. It's shifting you socially, pulling you from one status into another, carried on waves of song, chant, and cheer. Modern weddings may have string quartets or carefully curated playlists, but nothing, truly nothing, matches the chaotic joy of a medieval procession, where every squeaky bagpipe and shouted lineage becomes part of the story you'll never forget. The noise of the procession fades as you step into the heart of the ceremony space, and now all eyes are drawn to the clothes you wear. In this world, fashion isn't vanity, it's announcement. Your garments say who you are, what your family can afford, and what kind of future is expected. And let's be clear, the modern idea of a bride in pure white, that hasn't arrived yet. White as wedding color is centuries away, so don't imagine lace trains and pearl tiaras. Instead, think bold colors, symbolic textures, and maybe a splash of fur if the family coffers allow. The bride appears, and she's radiant, but not because of white silk. Instead, she might be in a gown of deep red or rich green, colors that signal prosperity and fertility. Blue, too, is favored, associated with the Virgin Mary and purity. The fabric matters, linen for the common, wool for sturdiness, silk for the wealthy. And the brighter the dye, the more expensive the message. If your bride's dress glows like a jewel in the sunlight, you know her family shelled out some serious coin. You yourself may not be spared scrutiny. A groom's tunic, belt, and cloak are inspected just as closely. Leather boots polished, embroidery on cuffs gleaming, a dagger at your side showing both practicality and status. Guests whisper about whether your outfit matches the bride's. After all, harmony in clothes suggests harmony in marriage. No pressure. The quirky tidbit here: some regions expected brides to wear their hair completely loose, cascading over their shoulders as a sign of virginity. Sounds glamorous until you realize medieval shampoo was more like rinsing with stale ale. Still, the symbolism mattered. Married women covered their hair, so those uncovered tresses spoke loudly. Innocence, fertility, and a clean slate. Headgear is its own world. Wealthy brides might sport a crown-like circlet shimmering with borrowed jewels. Poorer brides might weave flowers into their braids. Either way, what sits on the head carries as much weight as what drapes over the body. For grooms, hats or hoods declare rank, sometimes with silly long tails that flap dramatically in the wind. Imagine trying to look serious while a foot-long strip of fabric keeps slapping you in the face. Historians still argue whether wedding clothes were specially made or simply the best outfit a person owned. Some records suggest wealthy families commissioned garments just for the occasion, while others hint that brides wore dresses later recycled into Sunday finery. Either way, the point was clear. You showed up looking like the best possible version of yourself. As you stand there, you catch the faint rustle of fabric, the gleam of embroidery threads catching candlelight. Every detail feels charged. A green sash tied around the waist might symbolize fertility. A girdle given by the groom could serve as a love token. Even shoes carried meaning. New ones were lucky, but breaking them in too soon risked tripping during the vows, which everyone would interpret as an omen. Your nerves spike as you realize the danger of wardrobe malfunction. Torn seams? A bad omen? Dropped veil? Whispers of scandal? Too much fur in summer? A sweaty disaster. And yet, amid the anxiety, there's joy in the display. Guests delight in colors, textures, and symbols, just as people today gush over designer gowns and tailored suits. The bride turns slightly, and you glimpse embroidery at her cuffs, tiny birds stitched in gold. Someone whispers that they symbolize fidelity, a reminder that she will remain steadfast. You wonder if anyone noticed your own belt buckle, newly polished, its clasp shaped like a lion. To you, it's just a family heirloom. To others, it's a symbol of courage and virility. Every stitch, clasp, and die seems to speak in a secret language of status and symbolism. And yet, beneath the display, you see the human side. The bride tugs nervously at her sleeve, perhaps self-conscious about the fit. You shift your shoulders, aware of how stiff your new cloak feels. For all the symbolism, you're both just people in slightly uncomfortable outfits, standing in front of a critical crowd. As the music fades and silence settles, you realize the clothes are more than fabric. They're costumes in a play, props in a drama, and armor against gossip. And when the vows begin, no one will remember if the seams pinched or the hat sat crooked. They'll remember the blaze of color, the shimmer of silk or wool, and the sense that, for one day, you looked every bit the part you were meant to play. The time has come to bind your lives with gestures, words, and small metal circles that feel heavier than you expected. Rings are exchanged, but not always in the dainty way you imagined today. Sometimes they're simple iron bands, hammered roughly by local smiths, their imperfections a testament to the maker rather than lack of care. Other times, if the family is wealthy, the rings gleam with gold or silver, etched with initials or protective symbols. They're more than decoration. They're contracts, silent witnesses to the promises you're about to speak aloud. You kneel or stand, depending on local custom, and the priest or officiant begins the ritual. Vows are spoken, though they might be brief. I take thee for my wedded spouse, or some formulaic phrase repeated countless times across Europe. The emphasis is less on poetry and more on binding the couple legally and spiritually. Historians still argue whether these vows were heartfelt declarations of love or purely procedural utterances. Either way, your words, however unromantic, carry serious weight. A quirky detail emerges. In some regions, couples added little gestures
like clasping hands 3 times or touching a holy relic. These acts were meant to solidify the bond magically as well as legally. Imagine trying to balance sincerity, superstition, and the awkwardness of stiff medieval gloves all at once. Rings slide onto fingers, sometimes over gloves, sometimes under veils. The metal feels cold, a jolt against warm skin, and suddenly your hand feels heavier, laden not with gold, but with responsibility. This small circle, innocuous to the modern eye, has tethered your name to another's, with all the legal, familial, and social consequences that follow. Vows aren't always just about each other. Sometimes family and witnesses demand specific promises. The bride may be asked to obey her husband's household rules. The groom might vow to provide a dowry's equivalent in care and protection. Those tiny clauses, often murmured, carry long-term significance. Breach of such vows could lead to scandal or even legal action in ecclesiastical courts. The ceremony includes ritual gestures, too. Hands may be joined over a Bible, symbolically locking souls. Bread might be broken and shared, echoing Christ's presence, or a candle passed from one to the other to signify shared light. Some regions have unique quirks, kissing over a broomstick, tossing coins, or circling the altar 3 times to ensure fortune smiles upon the couple. Historians still argue whether such rituals were widely adopted or limited to local tradition, but they leave behind vivid stories for anyone curious about medieval eccentricities. Even amid solemnity, there's room for small humor. A clumsy ring-bearer might trip, sending the token skittering across the floor, drawing a hush and then a ripple of laughter. Perhaps a child wanders into the ritual, tugging at the bride's sleeve. These tiny imperfections humanize the ceremony, reminding you that history isn't always polished. By the time vows are complete, the room feels lighter, charged with energy. The rings glint, the hands stay clasped, and a collective breath seems to settle among the gathered witnesses. You're legally bound now, yes, but also socially and spiritually ensnared in a web that stretches far beyond the hall. And in that quiet moment, amid minor mishaps and whispered prayers, you can't help but marvel. A few words, a metal circle, and some carefully performed gestures have tied you to someone else for life. It's equal parts miraculous, terrifying, and exhilarating. Modern weddings may have fancy scripts and DJs, but the weight of medieval vows, uttered, witnessed, and ritualized, is something you will feel every time you look at that small ring on your finger. With vows spoken and rings snug on your fingers, attention shifts to the practical heartbeat of medieval matrimony: dowry, bride wealth, and property arrangements. Unlike the modern idea of a wedding as a personal celebration, these transfers were the backbone of marriage, the reason your family's accountants, or rather family elders, were so invested. Every coin, cow, or bolt of cloth had to be accounted for, recorded, and ideally witnessed. Forget romantic notions of shared life. In many ways, your union is a ledger given flesh. The dowry, the bride's contribution, is central. It could include money, jewelry, livestock, or even land, and its size often determines social perception. A wealthy dowry elevates the family, signaling prestige and stability. A modest dowry? That sends a whisper of caution through the community. Maybe the bride comes with charm, but her family lacks clout. Historians still argue whether dowries were primarily economic safeguards or symbolic gestures to cement alliances. Either way, they're serious business. Bride wealth, the groom's family providing for the bride or her kin, is sometimes less obvious but equally critical. This might involve a plot of farmland, a pig, or a chest of linens, often designed to reassure the bride's family that their daughter's well-being is secured. It's a tangible acknowledgement that the groom's household can provide, a medieval version of a prenup crossed with a status statement. The quirky parts? Some dowries included seemingly odd items, hens guaranteed to lay eggs for a year, a rare goat, or even a small plot of aromatic herbs. These weren't just random. Each item had utility, symbolism, or prestige. Imagine unpacking your dowry trunk today and finding a live goose staring back at you. Romantic? Not exactly. Functional? Absolutely. The negotiations themselves could be theatrical. Families haggled in front of witnesses, adjusting sums, adding livestock, sometimes throwing in clever bonuses, like a silver spoon or extra wine barrels. You watch, anxious, realizing that a single miscounted bolt of cloth or forgotten coin could spark dispute. And disputes were far from rare. Breach of dowry agreements could trigger legal action, sometimes escalating to the bishop's court or even secular authorities. Money aside, property transfers mattered for inheritance and power. If the bride brought land into the marriage, her offspring could claim that land in the future, reshaping village and county maps subtly but decisively. Wealth and status, you realize, aren't just in the family ledger, they're written into the landscape itself. As you witness the elders exchanging rolls of parchment, coins, and signed seals, you feel the heavy reality. Marriage is more than vows. It's a transaction that secures survival, prosperity, and influence. You might like to romanticize medieval weddings as candlelit affairs, but behind the smiles and music lies a network of obligations, contracts, and promises, each one enforceable by law and custom. Even amid this serious business, small gestures humanize the process. A child might wander past, clutching a ribbon from the dowry chest. An elderly aunt might peek over, whispering advice like, "Never trust a man who counts coins too eagerly." Humor and superstition mingle, reminding you that these arrangements are lived by people, not abstract legal concepts. By the end of these exchanges, you feel a strange mixture of relief and responsibility. The dowry is settled, the bride wealth handed over, and property lines are etched into both parchment and memory. The legal and social scaffolding of your marriage is secure, yet beneath it all, you realize that love, or at least companionship, must now navigate these very real structures. The day has moved from vows to contracts, and you understand, this marriage isn't just about two people. It's about families, wealth, survival, and reputation. And while modern couples might stress about seating charts or wedding colors, medieval couples stress about flocks, plots of land, and the occasional mystical goat. It's practical, chaotic, and somehow utterly compelling. With vows spoken and dowries exchanged, the moment everyone's been waiting for arrives: the wedding feast. If the marriage is a contract, the feast is the public announcement, a living advertisement of the union, and an opportunity for families to display both wealth and generosity. You trudge into the hall, your shoes crunching over the straw-strewn floor, and smell the aromas before you even glimpse the tables. Roasting meats, fresh bread, and stews bubbling in cauldrons. The feast is sensory overload, a combination of necessity and spectacle, signaling that this is no ordinary meal. The tables are arranged by rank, a hierarchy as carefully planned as any legal document. Nobles and elders at the high table, close family around them, and distant kin and servants farther out. Everyone knows their place, and missteps can provoke whispers or outright mockery. You notice your spot, feeling the dual weight of honor and expectation settle on your shoulders. Historians still argue how strictly commoners adhered to seating protocols versus the elite, but social signaling is everywhere. Even the clatter of plates carries meaning. Food is both sustenance and statement. Dishes are designed to impress: roasted fowl with golden skin, pies bursting with fruits and meats, and ale so strong it makes your head spin slightly. Some dishes carry symbolic weight: fish for fertility, eggs for abundance, and honey to sweeten the marriage. Every bite consumed in public is a small nod to prosperity and hospitality. Guests may murmur approval or scoff if portions are skimpy. A bad impression can ripple through the village for weeks. Quirky tidbits abound. Some feasts feature bizarre entremets, elaborate centerpieces, sometimes edible, sometimes mechanical, that depict scenes like a knight jousting or a dragon devouring a lamb. These amuse and astonish, blending spectacle with humor. Imagine trying to cut a slice of pie without accidentally toppling a miniature mechanical dragon. It's both terrifying and hilarious. Drinking, of course, is part of the ritual. Cups of ale and wine circulate, and toasts are made. Guests clink tankards, offering blessings that range from pious to bawdy. You sip cautiously, aware that one poorly timed gulp could result in a stumble, an insult, or worse, a challenge to your honor. Medieval weddings are public, and everything you do is scrutinized. Even your appetite is social currency. Entertainment intertwines with the feast. Minstrels play tunes that echo the procession, dancers perform between courses, and jesters, or occasionally clever guests, insert playful commentary. Some entertainments are ritualistic, like tossing nuts to unmarried youth to predict future matches, while others simply aim to break the monotony of formal seating. The interplay between solemnity and revelry keeps the crowd engaged and reminds everyone that weddings are as much about celebration as obligation. Historians still argue about how much ordinary villagers participated in lavish feasts versus observing from the edges. Some records suggest that peasants often received simple portions, while nobles reveled in extravagance. Either way, the feast functions as a social leveling device. Everyone observes the hierarchy, and everyone knows where power and resources reside. You notice little rituals. A priest or elder might bless the bread, a child may dart under the table chasing a stray chicken, and laughter punctuates the serious moments. It's a living tapestry of human behavior, chaotic but organized, nourishing but performative. By the end, you're full, exhausted, and slightly dizzy from ale and activity. But as you sit back and glance at the gathered crowd, you realize the feast is more than food. It's proof that the marriage is public, that families have consented, that alliances are visible and celebrated. The meal itself becomes a memory, woven into the ongoing story of your life and those who surround you. And as you leave the hall, patting a slightly drunken cousin on the shoulder and dodging a stray roasted chicken leg, you understand that the wedding feast is the bridge between vows and life lived, a communal declaration of connection, survival, and, for a few hours at least, joy. Once the plates are cleared and the last ale jug drained, the hall doesn't empty, it transforms. The wedding feast transitions into entertainment, and now dance, music, and games take center stage. Medieval weddings are never purely solemn affairs. Laughter and movement are vital, a counterbalance to the gravity of vows and contracts.
You trudge to the center of the hall, noticing how the wooden floorboards creak under eager feet, ready for whatever spectacle comes next. Dancers take the lead, forming lines, circles, and chains. Some movements are simple and communal, designed to involve as many guests as possible. Others are intricate, displaying skill and, implicitly, social standing. Nobles might demonstrate their elegance with flowing steps, while peasants improvise, stamping and hopping in ways that feel joyful, if a bit chaotic. Historians still argue whether complex choreographed dances were truly common at rural weddings or largely confined to courts. Either way, movement is both ritual and release. Music drives the action. Minstrels play flutes, fiddles, and drums, sometimes improvising to match the dancer's energy. The sound echoes off walls and beams, blending with laughter, clapping, and the occasional squeak of shoes. The chaotic cacophony becomes a shared experience, reminding everyone that weddings are collective events, social glue in motion. The quirky side? Some entertainments border on the absurd. Guests might participate in mock jousts with wooden poles, or performers could present short skits poking fun at villagers' habits. One tale recounts a marital prophecy game, where young men and women toss nuts or peas into a pot, believing that which lands closest to the bride or groom predicts future matches. Imagine trying to maintain dignity while dodging flying legumes. Humor is intentional. The jesters, minstrels, and playful guests provide comic relief, reminding everyone that marriage is serious, but life is unpredictable. If the bride trips during a dance, laughter erupts, softening tension and humanizing the ritual. Everyone understands that joy, chaos, and humility coexist at these gatherings. Games, too, carry symbolic meaning. Tug-of-war contests or archery challenges may reflect strength, fertility, or skill, qualities valued in married life. Some entertainments serve as courtship tools, allowing glimpses of compatibility between younger attendees who might themselves be future brides and grooms. It's subtle matchmaking within the overarching spectacle. Historians still debate whether these activities were more for communal enjoyment or subtle social instruction. Evidence points to both. Dances teach cooperation and hierarchy, while games reinforce expected behaviors for newly married couples and younger onlookers. You can see the logic. Participation proves social competence as much as physical skill. As night falls, the music grows louder and the candles flicker against timber walls. Everyone is drawn together. Laughter, song, dance, and even minor chaos fuse into one flowing rhythm. The communal energy binds kin, neighbors, and strangers alike, forging memory through motion. And as you sweat through your doublet, dodge a wildly swinging wooden stick, and grin at the absurdity of it all, you recognize that these dances and games aren't frivolous. They're a ritual expression of joy, fertility, and social cohesion, a reminder that amid the legal contracts, dowries, and vows, human delight remains a binding force. By the end of the evening, the hall is a blur of color, sound, and movement. Guests are laughing, tired, and slightly tipsy, but the memory of this chaos, these carefully structured entertainments, and the collective energy will linger for years, whispered about at taverns, markets, and hearths, long after the last fiddler packs up his instrument. As the evening wanes, the ritual of retiring to the bridal chamber begins. This moment, whispered about in records and letters, carries a tension unlike any other part of the wedding day. It's equal parts expectation, superstition, and ritual performance. You trudge down the dim corridor, the smell of beeswax candles mingling with lingering smoke from the feast, aware that everyone, kin, neighbors, servants, has an interest in what happens next. The bridal chamber itself is more than a bedroom. It's a stage for social, legal, and sometimes mystical acts. The bed is prepared with care, fresh linens if they can be afforded, embroidered coverings, sometimes sprinkled with flower petals or herbs believed to encourage fertility. In wealthier households, a canopy may be draped above, adorned with symbols of protection. Commoners may make do with straw-stuffed mattresses, but even then, ritual precautions abound. Historians still argue how widespread these fertility rituals were and whether they were purely symbolic or genuinely believed to affect conception. Guests rarely enter the chamber, though some traditions demand witnesses for the consummation. The most famous is the chambering custom, where parents or close family ensure the marriage is completed properly. Imagine trying to maintain modesty while being observed, awkward, intrusive, but culturally sanctioned. Some regions avoided this practice entirely, leaving couples to navigate the final rite privately. Quirky practices abound. In certain locales, a handkerchief or sheet might be inspected the next morning as proof of virginity. Elsewhere, ritual games might be performed on the bed, tossing apples, nuts, or coins to predict fertility or offspring gender. It sounds absurd today, but in medieval society, these acts were serious business, blending superstition and social expectation in a tangible, ritualistic form. As you settle onto the bed, you notice how all the day's sensory overload condenses here. The smells of food, the echo of music, the warmth of candles, all converge. Your heart pounds not only from nerves, but from the awareness that this final ritual transforms a public event into a private, binding act. You are no longer simply a person standing in a hall. You are the center of a network of obligations, alliances, and expectations now sealed by action. Even the mundane carries symbolism. Sleeping in the same bed is both practical and sacred. It affirms the union physically, legally, and spiritually. Couples often recited prayers or blessings over the bed, invoking divine protection, fertility, and harmony. The act of lying together, however awkward at first, is simultaneously intimate and socially regulated. Historians still debate how frequently these rituals led to actual marital success, or whether they were symbolic performances that masked anxiety and human error. Either way, medieval wedding nights were loaded with meaning, physical, social, and spiritual. The weight of family expectation, communal oversight, and superstition presses gently on your shoulders, reminding you that marriage in this era is never just private. The night stretches, and as sleep begins to tug at your eyelids, you notice the interplay between ritual and reality. Some couples fall asleep immediately, exhausted from the day's chaos. Others linger in whispered conversation, reconciling nervousness, curiosity, and relief. Outside, the world continues its noisy rhythm, but here in the chamber, time slows. It's a strange, tender liminality. The first night transforms you from single participant in a village spectacle to a married person, fully enmeshed in family networks, community expectations, and the hopes of generations. Modern couples may sneak away to a honeymoon suite, but medieval couples lie under shared blankets, surrounded by symbols, rituals, and whispers of ancestors, feeling the weight and wonder of what they have just begun.
Morning arrives with a fragile light filtering through small windows, casting shadows that stretch lazily across the chamber. You stir, aware that the wedding isn't over, far from it. Today begins a series of rituals and social obligations collectively known as the morning after, or post-nuptial visitations. This is less about private intimacy now and more about public acknowledgement. Friends, family, and neighbors have their eyes and ears tuned for signs that the marriage has been consummated and the household is harmonious. You pull on garments stiff from the night's sleep, noticing how the details still carry weight. The bed may be inspected, sometimes literally, for the remnants of the previous night's rituals. Herbs, petals, or even a handkerchief could be examined for proof of fidelity or fertility. This isn't simply superstition, it's social enforcement. A mishap, real or imagined, can ripple outward, affecting reputation and family standing. Historians still debate how common such inspections were and whether they were mostly symbolic or actively enforced. But records suggest enough incidents that couples knew to proceed with care. Breakfast is usually modest but ceremonial. Bread, cheese, and ale might be set out, and the couple is expected to eat in the presence of family or close witnesses. This simple act is a signal. Life continues, the household runs smoothly, and the union is functioning. Some regions insist the couple serves guests or shares their first meal with elders, emphasizing cooperation and respect. Quirky details abound. In some villages, a rooster might be released into the chamber or courtyard to signal fertility or wakefulness. Children sometimes dart in, scattering crumbs or giggling, blending innocence with superstition. One account even describes a guest tossing coins at the couple as a playful blessing, the clinking sound meant to attract prosperity. It's a mix of practicality, ritual, and human whimsy, all interwoven. The post-nuptial visitations also serve as a social learning opportunity. Guests observe how the couple interacts. Are they polite, cooperative, attentive? These tiny performances matter because the broader community judges the success of the match by public behavior. You might think private disputes are, well, private, but not in this world. Even minor awkwardness could inspire rumors that follow you for years. Property and household roles start to assert themselves immediately. You might be asked to help with chores, manage livestock, or oversee the meal's preparation. The bride may begin her duties, from cleaning and cooking to managing the family's resources. Modern notions of honeymoon leisure are rare. Instead, practical integration into daily life is the focus. Historians still argue about how equitable these responsibilities were, but evidence suggests that both families and community expectations pushed for immediate contribution. By mid-morning, neighbors arrive to offer congratulations and advice. Some bring gifts, eggs, linens, or small tokens of luck. Others whisper words of caution or gossip, reminding the couple that life now is as much about appearances as it is about domestic partnership. The social web tightens around you again, binding your choices and behaviors to collective observation. And yet, amid these obligations, there is tenderness. Quiet moments occur when the household settles into rhythm. Hands brush while passing a loaf of bread. Shared laughter emerges over a minor mishap, and fleeting glances carry reassurance. These small interactions are precious, revealing the human side of a ritualized world. By noon, you realize that the wedding has morphed into a continuum rather than a single event. From vows to procession, feast, chamber, and now post-nuptial ritual, The day blends ceremony with practical integration, public acknowledgement with private adaptation. Medieval weddings are not contained in hours. They are social and domestic experiences extending far beyond the altar. As the day unfolds, the public aspect of your marriage continues to dominate. Neighbors, distant relatives, and even casual passers-by often drop by in what we might now call an open house, curious to witness, comment, and sometimes subtly influence the couple's early days. In a small village, privacy is a luxury. Your every gesture, how you greet guests, how the bride handles her new household duties, even how you distribute leftover food, becomes a subtle performance. Historians still argue how much of this observation was ritualized versus casual social policing, but one thing is clear: appearances mattered, and your marriage is now communal property, in a sense. The morning's modest meal transitions into informal snacking and drinking. Guests linger, swapping advice, and inevitably gossip. You notice how elders provide guidance wrapped in humor or superstition. One might hand the bride a sprig of rosemary, whispering that it ensures fertility, while another murmurs a cryptic warning about marrying too hastily. These gestures, small as they seem, carry centuries of tradition and social expectation. Quirky customs abound. In some regions, neighbors toss grains or nuts into the courtyard, believing this would bless the couple with abundance and children. Sometimes animals become unwitting participants. Chickens wandering among guests are seen as omens of prosperity or discord, depending on which direction they run. You dodge a particularly audacious rooster and can't help but smile at how seriously superstition mingled with daily life. Meanwhile, the bride is already learning her new domestic domain. Whether it's tending animals, preparing meals, or managing household inventory, she begins her duties under both observation and expectation. In wealthier households, this might include supervising servants. In simpler homes, it's hands-on labor. For the groom, duties vary, but often involve proving himself capable in both physical labor and social interactions. Historians still debate the extent to which labor divisions were rigidly gendered or flexible, depending on economic necessity and family culture. Amid this structure, subtle power dynamics play out. Family elders may assert influence by questioning minor decisions, testing patience, or reminding the couple of previous agreements. It's not malicious, mostly, but it reinforces hierarchy and reminds everyone that marriage extends beyond two individuals. Your bond is now embedded in a network of expectations, alliances, and surveillance. Games and small competitions sometimes punctuate the day. Tossing apples, wrestling contests, or archery trials allow young adults to demonstrate skill or humor while also providing entertainment. A minor victory or defeat could become anecdote fodder for weeks. Quirky yet socially meaningful, these activities blend celebration with the subtle lessons of hierarchy, skill, and community participation. By afternoon, exhaustion mingles with satisfaction. You pause to watch guests mingle, noting the intricate dance of conversation, laughter, and advice-giving. The day is not a single event, but a layered experience, weaving social, spiritual, and practical threads into a single tapestry. As evening approaches, you recognize that these ongoing rituals are just as crucial as the vows, rings, and feast. The marriage is performed repeatedly in small gestures, observations, and communal acknowledgments. Modern weddings might condense such exposure into a single day, but medieval marriages extend the public ritualized celebration far beyond initial ceremonies, embedding the couple into a living, breathing social fabric. As dusk settles, the day's earlier chaos begins to soften, but the wedding's influence doesn't wane. Now comes the time for gifts and symbolic tokens, a ritual that can feel both festive and stressful. Guests present items meant to secure good fortune, fertility, or practical support for the new household. A basket of eggs might be accompanied by whispered advice. A finely woven blanket carries prestige and hints of familial expectation. Even small objects are laden with meaning, demonstrating the social web that surrounds the couple. You trudge to receive the first gifts, noticing the subtle dance of gratitude, modesty, and social hierarchy. Refusing a gift could insult the giver. Over-exuberant thanks might appear opportunistic. Every gesture communicates both respect and awareness of the community's rules. Historians still debate how formalized these exchanges were. Did families have codified lists of acceptable presents, or was it an evolving social improvisation? Evidence suggests a mix of both, depending on region and wealth. Quirky gifts abound. Some villages provided symbolic items, a tiny figurine of a rooster for fertility, a small clay pig for prosperity, or even herbs like rue to ward off evil spirits. In wealthier households, gifts might include coins, jewelry, or linens. The oddity isn't just amusing, it reflects a culture steeped in symbolism, where every object can carry multiple layers of meaning. Imagine receiving a sprig of rosemary with a side eye from your aunt, practical, mystical, and slightly judgmental. The presentation often includes minor public theater. Donors step forward, declare their intentions, and hand over the item with ritualized words, watched closely by all present. Your responses must balance humility, gratitude, and acknowledgement of status, skills you might not have thought necessary in a wedding, but quickly discover are essential. Small missteps here ripple outward. A sarcastic remark or a mismanaged bow could spark whispered commentary for weeks. Meanwhile, the couple's interaction continues to be observed. Are you attentive to one another, exchanging smiles or coordinating gestures? Or are you distracted, preoccupied, or clumsy? Community members judge not only the gift exchanges, but also the couple's comportment. These observations feed into the narrative of the marriage, informing gossip, advice, and future social interactions. Games and social entertainment persist into the evening. Guests might challenge each other to contests of wit, dexterity, or humor, blending celebration with lessons in skill and hierarchy. Even minor mishaps, spilled ale, tripped dancers, become stories to be retold, reinforcing communal memory. Historians still argue how structured these entertainments were, but they undeniably serve both joy and subtle social instruction. By nightfall, the ritualized display of gifts, thanks, and communal observation winds down, leaving the couple with tangible evidence of the day's significance. Objects, gestures, and subtle social cues now form a mosaic of meaning, tying the marriage not just to two people, but to families, friends, and the wider village. Every token reminds you that marriage is both intimate and public, practical and symbolic, joyous and serious. And as you finally sit quietly with your spouse, holding hands over gifts and tokens, you understand the depth of medieval marriage, a continuous performance, binding not just hearts, but households and communities. Even small objects can carry the weight of generations, and even minor gestures communicate status, care, and expectation. The evening's calm doesn't last long because medieval weddings often include communal dancing and revelry that extends deep into the night. You trudge back into the hall, noticing how shadows flicker against the timber walls, candle flames wobbling in a rhythm that seems to match the dancers' feet. Unlike the carefully choreographed dances of earlier in the day, nighttime dancing is freer, louder, and slightly chaotic, a release valve after the carefully structured ceremonies, dowry negotiations, and gift presentations. Music is central. Fiddles, flutes, and drums once again dominate. But now, improvisation is king. Minstrels respond to the dancer's energy, speeding up when feet stomp faster, slowing down when exhaustion sets in. You notice that improvisation isn't limited to instruments. Guests add shouts, claps, and calls, creating a living, breathing soundscape. Historians still debate how much professional musicians shaped the experience versus villagers simply joining in. But one thing is clear: sound dictates movement and mood. Quirky traditions appear in these late-night dances. In some regions, couples toss apples to unmarried guests to predict who will marry next. In others, a handkerchief might be waved in a playful contest to signal flirtation or test dexterity. These small rituals are simultaneously whimsical and symbolic, blending superstition, courtship, and communal entertainment into a single energetic event. You notice how social hierarchy continues to shape participation. Nobles or elders lead certain dances, while younger or lower status villagers follow or improvise. Every step is observed. A misstep might provoke laughter, a stumble could generate gossip, and a particularly graceful move earns admiration. Dance becomes both expression and social navigation. Food and drink continue to play a supporting role. Small snacks, bread, and cheese circulate, and ale or wine keep spirits high. Tipsy guests may stumble, laughter erupts, and the hall fills with a mixture of mirth and minor chaos. You can't help but chuckle when someone knocks over a chair or accidentally trips a neighbor. Medieval weddings embrace imperfection, reminding everyone that celebration is messy and alive. The bride and groom, at the center of this living tapestry, must balance participation with decorum. Your gestures, coordination, and interactions are scrutinized subtly, and every minor success or failure is woven into communal memory. This is social apprenticeship in real time. Dancing, laughing, and interacting while maintaining dignity is a skill passed down in every celebration. Historians still argue about how inclusive nighttime revelry truly was. Some accounts suggest strict divisions, men and women separated at times, or lower status villagers relegated to peripheral dances. Other records depict more egalitarian festivities. Either way, energy and human connection define the night, outweighing the strictures of hierarchy, at least temporarily. As candles burn lower and feet grow tired, you notice a sense of collective satisfaction. Laughter lingers, music hums faintly in memory, and the chaos of the day slowly condenses into stories that will be retold. The late-night dances don't merely entertain, they solidify bonds, release tension, and embed the marriage into the shared memory of the community. By the time you finally retire, muscles aching and cheeks flushed, you understand that medieval weddings are multi-layered experiences, a mix of ceremony, ritual, superstition, obligation, and exuberant human connection. Tonight's dances are a vital part of that story, a living bridge between formal vows and the messy, joyful reality of life together. As the revelry winds down, the next morning brings a quieter, reflective pace, yet ritual and social obligation continue. Medieval weddings extend beyond the public spectacle. The couple must now navigate the early days of married life under communal observation. You wake to sunlight filtering through the chamber, hearing the faint sounds of villagers beginning their routines outside, and realize the wedding is far from over. Social integration begins in earnest. The first task is household management. Even for noble families, daily life demands attention. Feeding animals, managing servants, tending to food storage, or overseeing small repairs. In common households, it's hands-on labor, baking bread, milking cows, fetching water. You notice how the community watches, judging competence and diligence. A stumble in chores could invite whispered commentary, while efficient handling earns subtle approval. Historians still debate how strictly these early domestic roles were assigned, but evidence shows that both bride and groom were expected to contribute almost immediately. Symbolic actions mark the morning as well. The couple might sprinkle herbs or grains throughout the home to invite fertility and prosperity. In some regions, neighbors toss coins into the yard as a blessing, their clinking sound echoing in memory as well as in space. Children might dart about, adding chaos and humor, and elders may give gentle reminders about duties or etiquette. These small rituals weave superstition, social guidance, and communal oversight together seamlessly. The bride and groom begin to interact more naturally, negotiating daily life. Sharing meals, divvying chores, and coordinating responsibilities is a form of social rehearsal. You notice that humor becomes essential. A spilled pail of milk, a mismanaged hearth, or a clumsy pass of firewood invites laughter, diffuses tension, and teaches flexibility. Quirky tales abound. One account describes a newlywed couple arguing over who would fetch a stray chicken, only to have it disappear entirely, much to the amusement of neighbors. Visitation continues. Friends and family drop by, not merely for celebration, but to observe, advise, and sometimes tease. Every gesture carries meaning. A careful bow, a shared laugh, or a well-timed compliment signals attentiveness and respect. Social standing, communication, and performance remain intertwined. You realize marriage is as much about relational skill as it is about love or legal agreements. Historians still argue how much of this early married scrutiny was practical versus performative. Some suggest it was a form of informal community enforcement, while others see it as ritualized pedagogy for newlyweds. Either way, it serves to embed the couple within the village or family network, ensuring continuity and mutual accountability. By mid-morning, fatigue from the previous day mingles with a sense of purpose. The rituals, small tasks, and ongoing observations establish patterns for future household management, social interaction, and familial negotiation. You notice that even mundane acts, like passing a loaf of bread or sweeping the floor, become symbolic gestures in the early dance of marriage. As the sun climbs higher, you understand that medieval weddings don't conclude at the altar or after the feast. They extend into the rhythms of daily life, where each task, gesture, and observation reinforces bonds, social norms, and communal expectations. These early days are formative, setting the tone for a lifetime woven into public and private spheres alike. By late morning, you begin to notice how the surrounding community actively shapes the couple's daily rhythm. Guests and relatives, far from leaving after the feast, continue to visit in what might seem like intrusive bursts of supervision and advice. Every action, from sweeping the floor to arranging the table, is under observation, and subtle judgments are made about competence, character, and compatibility. In small villages, this communal involvement isn't optional. It's a social expectation. Historians still debate the balance between oversight and genuine assistance, but the result is the same. The marriage is public property in a living, breathing sense. Food continues to play a central role. Simple meals are shared, yet each bite carries social significance. The manner in which the couple serves guests, distributes portions, or reacts to the inevitable mishaps signals both household management skills and social awareness. You notice the bride handing a loaf to an elderly neighbor with careful attention, and the groom fetching ale from a nearby barrel without spilling a drop. Small victories that resonate with observers. Quirky rituals persist. In some communities, neighbors scatter nuts or coins around the home as a blessing for fertility and wealth. In others, children may participate in playful tests of the couple's teamwork, such as passing a bucket of water or carrying eggs without dropping them. Each of these small acts blends superstition, humor, and social instruction, subtly reinforcing communal norms while keeping spirits high. The couple's own interactions grow more nuanced. Negotiating chores, coordinating meals, and dividing responsibilities becomes a gentle, ongoing rehearsal for married life. Disagreements are inevitable. Who will tend the livestock? Who will start the fire? But humor and small gestures smooth friction. Even minor accidents like dropping a pan of porridge are opportunities to demonstrate patience, care, and adaptability. These acts may seem trivial, but they're socially and emotionally significant in the early days of marriage. Gifts and tokens from the wedding continue to influence behavior. A blanket placed carefully on the bed, coins tucked into drawers, or herbs hanging from the ceiling all serve as reminders of the community's blessing and expectations. Each item reinforces the marriage's visibility and embeds it further into social memory. Historians still argue how consistently such post-wedding oversight occurred across regions and classes. Evidence suggests that while noble households might experience formal visitation rituals, even peasants' marriages were subject to observation, advice, and ritualized behavior. Either way, communal involvement extends the wedding from a single event into a socially structured transition period. By afternoon, exhaustion mingles with emerging confidence. You notice the couple adjusting to their roles, coordinating meals, managing minor household crises, and responding to advice with patience. Every task is a rehearsal, every small success or failure a lesson in social navigation and partnership. As shadows lengthen, you recognize a pattern. Medieval weddings don't conclude with the vows or feast. They extend into the rhythms of domestic life, communal interaction, and ritualized oversight. The union is continuously performed, gradually solidifying into a stable, socially recognized partnership. Evening arrives, carrying with it a subtle shift in atmosphere. The public bustle of the previous day gives way to quieter, more intimate rituals that reinforce the couple's bond while maintaining the social and spiritual dimensions of marriage. You trudge through the familiar hallways, noticing the fading scent of herbs and smoke, aware that tonight's activities are more reflective than performative. One of the central features is the evening blessing, or prayer ritual. Families, and sometimes neighbors, gather briefly to offer protection, fertility, and harmony. Candles flicker softly, casting elongated shadows over timber walls, while murmured prayers create a gentle hum in the background.
The act of communal blessing is both symbolic and practical. It reinforces the couple's social legitimacy and spiritual security. Historians still argue about the frequency and universality of these blessings, but written accounts and oral tradition suggest they were common across social classes. Quirky customs persist. Some regions encourage the couple to sprinkle water from a nearby stream over thresholds, or to pass a loaf of bread around the household 3 times before sharing it. Each act carries layers of meaning: fertility, protection, and acknowledgement of communal support. In wealthier households, ceremonial gestures might include lighting incense or placing small charms under pillows, merging superstition with ritual in ways that feel simultaneously solemn and whimsical. As the couple moves through these evening acts, they negotiate private space and public expectation. Hands brush while passing candles, whispered guidance comes from elders, and subtle laughter breaks tension. These small moments of intimacy are framed by ritual, offering a gentle introduction to domestic partnership. The interplay of humor, guidance, and symbolic acts provides both comfort and instruction. Gifts and tokens from the wedding continue to influence behavior, subtly reminding the couple of communal ties. A quilt draped over a chair, coins placed strategically, or herbs hung nearby all serve as symbolic reinforcement, bridging past celebrations with ongoing life. These objects are functional yet deeply meaningful, embedding social expectation into everyday action. The evening often includes light entertainment as well: a jester's brief performance, a song sung by a visiting relative, or storytelling that blends amusement with moral lessons. These activities ease tension, foster community, and reinforce the narrative of marriage as both social and spiritual undertaking. Historians still debate whether such evening rituals were common among all classes or primarily a feature of wealthier households. Evidence suggests a spectrum. Peasants adapted practices to available resources, while nobles incorporated more elaborate symbolism and performance. Either way, the rituals serve to merge private intimacy with communal acknowledgement. By nightfall, the couple begins to understand the rhythm of married life, blending personal interaction with inherited expectation, practical management, and social performance. The day concludes not with exhaustion alone, but with a sense of continuity, ritual, community, and partnership flowing seamlessly into one another. Night deepens, and with it comes the final layers of ritual, intimacy, and reflection that define the early stages of medieval married life. The household quiets, but the couple remains alert to both private and social expectations. You trudge to the chamber once more, aware that even in solitude, ritual, superstition, and social memory linger in subtle ways. The bridal chamber is now a space for both rest and continued ceremonial acts. In some households, prayers are whispered over the bed, invoking fertility, harmony, and protection from misfortune. Candles burn low, casting a warm glow across linen strewn with petals or herbs. Even a simple gesture, like smoothing a blanket or arranging a pillow, carries symbolic weight. Historians still argue whether these nightly rituals were widely practiced or mostly reserved for wealthier families, but evidence shows they were deeply meaningful to those who observed them. Quirky superstitions endure. A few coins might be hidden under pillows to attract prosperity, or a small charm placed on the threshold to ward off spirits. In some regions, couples toss a handful of grain or seeds onto the floor, symbolizing fertility and abundance. The act seems small,
even playful, yet it is loaded with significance, merging domestic practicality with mystical protection. Interaction between spouses continues to blend the private with the socially informed. Shared meals, whispered conversation, and gentle guidance from more experienced family members shape behavior. Even minor disagreements over chores, space, or interpretation of rituals become lessons in negotiation, patience, and empathy. Humor is essential. A small spill, a misfired gesture, or accidental stumble invites laughter, humanizing the structured life of obligation. The surrounding household may remain attentive, though more subtly. A servant passing quietly through, an elder checking on the fire, or a child dropping in for attention, all remind the couple that even moments of private intimacy are framed within social life. The lesson is constant. Marriage exists at the intersection of love, duty, and community. Historians still debate how much ritualized oversight persisted in the days immediately following the wedding versus gradually fading into normal household dynamics. Evidence suggests a spectrum. Some couples enjoyed more autonomy quickly, while others lived under communal scrutiny for weeks. Either way, these early routines shape long-term patterns of partnership, responsibility, and social interaction. By the late hour, fatigue settles in, yet there is a quiet satisfaction. The couple has navigated vows, feasts, dances, gifts, and household integration, surviving both ceremonial expectation and communal observation. You sense that medieval weddings are less discrete events and more extended transitions, a continuum linking ritual, social learning, and personal experience. Even in stillness, you notice the threads of ceremony, superstition, and social expectation woven into every gesture, glance, and action. By night's end, the couple is not merely married by law or ritual, but bound to a living network of family, community, and tradition. The days following a medieval wedding are a blend of routine, ritual, and communal observation, gradually shaping the marriage into a stable, socially recognized partnership. You wake to soft morning light, the scents of herbs, fire smoke, and lingering bread filling the chamber. Life now settles into a rhythm, punctuated by obligations, subtle ceremonies, and small gestures that reinforce both intimacy and social expectation. Household duties dominate early routines, preparing meals, tending animals, managing storage, and maintaining cleanliness are essential tasks. The bride and groom share these responsibilities according to custom, capacity, and necessity, with slight variations depending on wealth and status. You notice how even mundane acts, fetching water, sweeping the floor, carry symbolic meaning. Competence demonstrates readiness, patience fosters harmony, and collaboration signals mutual respect. Historians still debate how strictly these roles were enforced, but evidence indicates that early domestic routines were formative for long-term partnership. Social observation continues. Neighbors, family members, and even casual visitors may drop in, offering advice, blessing, or playful commentary. Every interaction subtly reinforces the couple's status, competence, and adherence to custom. Quirky rituals persist. Children might toss coins into the courtyard, herbs may be sprinkled for fertility, or small games like egg-tossing test coordination and cooperation. Each action blends superstition, social learning, and humor, creating an ongoing performance of marital life. The couple's own interactions evolve, negotiating chores, sharing meals, and coordinating daily routines provide repeated opportunities to practice patience, communication, and compromise. Minor mishaps, spilled ale,
dropped bread, or clumsy coordination are met with laughter, instruction, or gentle correction, emphasizing the human aspect of structured living. Humor and adaptability become essential skills. Over the following days, symbolic reminders of the wedding, gifts, tokens, coins, herbs, and embroidered linens continue to influence behavior. They anchor the marriage in communal memory, signaling ongoing support, expectations, and blessings. The presence of these objects transforms the home into a living testament to ritual, obligation, and continuity. Historians still argue how standardized these post-wedding practices were across regions and social classes. Some evidence points to formal oversight and ritual repetition, particularly among the elite, while peasant couples adapted traditions to available resources and necessity. Either way, these early days bridge the ceremonial spectacle of the wedding with the lived reality of domestic partnership. By the end of this period, you recognize a recurring pattern. Medieval weddings are not singular events but extended transitions, integrating legal, social, spiritual, and practical dimensions. Vows, rings, feasts, dances, gifts, rituals, and communal oversight merge seamlessly into daily life. Marriage is continually enacted, performed, and observed, reinforcing bonds between couple, family, and community. As the initial flurry of activity settles into routine, you feel a quiet understanding. The success of a medieval marriage depends on skill, cooperation, patience, and attention to both human and societal expectations. The rituals, playful traditions, and symbolic objects of the wedding day leave traces in every daily act, blending joy, responsibility, and social harmony into the ongoing story of married life. Now that the wedding celebrations, rituals, and early domestic routines have unfolded, the pace gently eases. You sink into the quiet rhythm of the home, noticing how the sounds of the day, the clatter of dishes, the laughter of children, the faint echo of neighbors' voices, slowly fade into a softer hum. Candlelight flickers against the walls, drawing shadows that stretch lazily across the timber beams, and the warmth of hearth and home feels reassuring. The intensity of vows, feasts, dances, and communal observation recedes, leaving behind a sense of accomplishment and belonging. You trace the edges of the day in memory, the smell of roasted meats, the creak of wooden floors under dancing feet, the feel of petals and herbs scattered in the chamber, and even the occasional chaos of dropped coins or spilled ale. Each sensory memory weaves into the larger tapestry of the couple's early life, blending the practical, social, and symbolic into a single lived experience. Even as activity diminishes, lessons linger. Humility, patience, humor, and adaptability, skills practiced in minor mishaps, gift exchanges, and post-nuptial tasks, remain vital for sustaining domestic harmony. You reflect on how small gestures, from sweeping the floor to arranging linens or laughing at a minor spill, create bonds that extend far beyond ceremonial performance. The mundane is elevated to meaningful, each action resonating with social and symbolic weight. The home itself becomes a sanctuary, a space where ritual meets daily life. Objects, coins, herbs, embroidered linens, tokens from guests, anchor memory and expectation, subtly guiding behavior while offering reminders of community support and blessing. You notice the quiet joy in simply sharing space and responsibilities, the gentle laughter that arises from minor mishaps, and the comfort in mutual care. As the evening deepens, time seems to stretch and slow. The flurry of festivities has passed, leaving a soft, contemplative calm. The couple's first days of marriage, once fraught with ceremony, scrutiny, and playful ritual, now settle into a steady rhythm. The world outside continues its noise and bustle, but here, in the warmth of shared hearth and quiet understanding, there is solace and continuity. Take a deep breath. Let the gentle cadence of life, ritual, and shared history settle around you. The day's lessons, humor, and small rituals linger like a soft echo, comforting and steady. Medieval weddings, you realize, are not just about vows or feasts. They are living, breathing experiences that blend the social, the practical, and the intimate. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let this memory of celebration, ritual, and human connection lull you toward rest.